The sun climbed over Bamberg on May 1st, 1573, as a young man stepped forward, not to witness justice, but to deliver it. At only 19, Frantz Schmidt entered the city square carrying a sword that would decide another man's fate. Before him, a thief knelt bound and shaking, waiting for the final command. When Schmidt raised the blade for the first time, the burden of family shame, imperial duty, and centuries of prejudice weighed heavy on him. With one clean stroke, he began a profession that would end the lives of 394 people. Frantz Schmidt had not chosen this path by ambition, but by inheritance. His father, Heinrich Schmidt, had once lived quietly as a woodsman until the Margrave of Brandenburg-Ansbach forced him into the role of executioner, an order no subject could refuse. From that day, the Schmidt family carried a brand of dishonor that clung for generations. In the Holy Roman Empire, executioners were tolerated yet despised, instruments of law who lived in social exile. Their children were often denied entry into trades, guilds, or even church life. But Frantz refused to let the name define him as an outcast. Instead, he sought to elevate it. Under his father's guidance in the town of Hof, he mastered the grim skills of strangulation, beheading, and public humiliation punishments. His first test, however, came in Bamberg, a rising hub of Franconian power, where he stood before the people as both enforcer and pariah. That morning remained etched forever in his personal execution diary. On May 1st, 1573, I wielded the sword for the first time. In Bamberg. This simple line was not just a record. It was the moment a young man inherited the empire's justice. His act was not rebellion nor cruelty. It was law, carried out under contract. For Bamberg's council, executioners were civil officials like any other, their wages noted in city ledgers. One record bluntly states, the executioner Frantz Schmidt is paid for the sentence carried out. Yet, behind this bureaucratic entry stood a 19-year-old who had just taken a life, serving a society that both relied on him and despised him. Schmidt, however, never saw himself bound only to the scaffold. His ambition reached further, toward legitimacy, respect, and professional recognition. Over the following decades, he became one of the most respected specialists in the empire. Frantz did not merely perform executions. He institutionalized them. His career was proof that in the Holy Roman Empire, justice could lift even those marked as untouchable, if they wielded the sword with flawless precision. The ritual of justice. Public executions under Frantz Schmidt. The marketplace in Nuremberg stirred with restless energy. Families crowded onto barrels for a better view. Merchants clutched their aprons and children whispered in awe. At the center of the platform stood a composed figure in dark official clothing, Frantz Schmidt. Before him, a convicted murderer knelt beside the block. In a single, precise movement, Schmidt's blade flashed, and the execution was complete. From 1573 until his retirement in 1617, Schmidt ended 394 lives throughout the Holy Roman Empire. But his career was not just a tally of deaths. Every act was a ritual, carefully shaped by imperial law, civic order, and ancient custom. To councils and courts, Schmidt was not a monster, but a necessary civil servant, an embodiment of lawful punishment. The sword became his symbol. On July 15, 1589, he recorded in his diary, "I beheaded Andreas Rascher with the sword." He had murdered a man on the road to Würzburg. The execution, witnessed by a public crowd, was swift and exact. Sword beheading was considered the most honorable form of death, reserved for male criminals of higher rank. Unlike hanging or breaking on the wheel, the sword allowed the condemned a dignified end. But such honor demanded perfection. A single failed blow meant horror, pain, and disgrace. By all surviving accounts, Schmidt never faltered. Not every sentence ended with dignity. On April 3, 1587, Frantz Schmidt carried out the execution of a serial killer. The chosen method was the breaking wheel, one of Europe's most dreaded punishments. It was not designed for swiftness, but for horror. Limbs were smashed one by one with an iron bar, the victim often fully conscious, agony stretching into hours. Schmidt's diary entry for the day is spare, almost emotionless, yet the brutality speaks for itself. Such punishments were reserved only for the gravest crimes: murder, treason, and blasphemy. Justice in Schmidt's world was deeply shaped by gender. For women convicted of infanticide, the law prescribed a punishment as symbolic as it was terrifying: saxtos. The condemned was sewn into a sack, sometimes with an animal, often a dog or a rooster, and drowned in water. Though not always staged for public spectacle, these acts were conducted before officials and townspeople. A ritual cleansing meant to purge the community of sins too heavy to endure. Even fire was within Schmidt's duty. Burning at the stake was inflicted on crimes that corrupted not only the body, but the soul: sorcery, heresy, and poisoning. The blaze consumed slowly, the air filled with silence as onlookers bore witness. Here, death was not only execution, but public purification. And yet, Schmidt himself was no sadist. He did not revel in cruelty nor seek glory in death. His solemn demeanor and careful precision reflected the larger structure of justice in the empire. To falter, to waver, was to shake confidence in law itself. In an age where punishment was ceremony, the executioner was not a shadow at the margins. He was the visible hand of order. Frantz Schmidt's killings were not chaos. They were governance. A man broken on the wheel warned of the cost of murder. A clean sword stroke reassured that justice was exact. In the Holy Roman Empire, where justice stood in the public square, Schmidt embodied its execution. From blood to honor, the unlikely legacy of the executioner at St. Rochus Cemetery, his grave bears no mark of shame, no skull, no reminder of disgrace. Instead, the stone honors him. Frantz Schmidt, vengeance's hand, healer's heart, honored in death as in life. For nearly 50 years he took lives, but in his last years he began saving them. Few legacies in medieval Europe are as paradoxical as his. Born into dishonor, condemned to a profession despised yet required, Schmidt lived as a pariah. The law employed him, but society rejected him. His children bore the same stigma, his touch regarded as ritually unclean despite his service to the empire. In 1617, after his 394th execution, Schmidt laid down the sword. But retirement did not mean silence. With decades of anatomical knowledge, he turned to healing. He set bones, dressed wounds, and prepared herbal remedies. Where once people feared his presence, now they sought his help. His diary records the transition with quiet finality. "I ceased serving at the block and began attending to the ill." The transformation did not pass unnoticed. In 1624, Emperor Ferdinand II issued a remarkable decree. Frantz Schmidt was declared ehrlich, honorable. For the first time in imperial history, an executioner was restored to dignity. The imperial decree did more than clear his name, it erased the very stigma of his profession. With one command, Frantz Schmidt was no longer marked by dishonor, but restored as an equal among the very citizens who once shunned him. For decades, he had carried out the empire's justice with unshakable precision. Now, at last, the empire repaid him with its highest recognition. When Schmidt died in 1634, it was not as an exile, but as a respected burgher of Nuremberg. His grave still speaks to a paradox the medieval world rarely granted: that a man who spent a lifetime ending lives could himself be remembered with dignity. His legacy compels us to confront an unsettling question. Can a career forged in blood ever conclude in honor? Declared ehrlich, no longer stained by his office, and thus restored to honorable standing. The imperial pardon of 1624 by Emperor Ferdinand II. Comment below: do you believe that justice, when carried out by an outcast, can ever truly earn society's acceptance?